Now is the time to fire Joe Mazzulla. Do I think we should have fired Ime Udoka? No. That's just my personal opinion. But whatever situation that happened in this climate, you cannot afford for the alleged stuff that happened, but he's hired in a year to Houston. That's a whole different situation. But in course of what was happening in Boston at that time, Boston felt like that was the best move to make. And it was right up before the season. They flipped to Joe Mazzulla. Um, I found out that he has 3 years, $14 million left on his deal, so that's just underneath $5 million. I don't know what the price tag for coaches around the league is. Mike Budenholzer was getting $8 million, so to see Joe Mazzulla get $4.6 million roughly, it's like, oh, okay. Um, so there's at least a little bit of commitment there to him, right? And this season was bumpy at times. I think the offense took off earlier in the season. He figured out some things that we kind of needed to do. I think we lost a little bit defensively there. And of course, people are going to rip him apart for the rotations. We had that issue with Ime, of course, had that issue with Brad Stevens. Um, Defensively, I just don't think he was there in terms of making adjustments and certain things of that nature, and reluctance to do stuff in terms of adjustments over the course of games, attacking the basket, not shooting the three as much, changing up the defense, trying anything basically to just win the game. Where we just saw in the Eastern Conference Finals, he's the least experienced coach in terms of experience, right? Like Darvin Ham, Mike Malone, Eric Spoelstra all have experience prior to becoming head coaches as assistants, longevity as an assistants as well, and now they're head coaches. So the ability to make adjustments, galvanize off a team, and do things of that's a struggle point for him just because of the way the season started and everything came into play. And over the course of the season, you're going to take your lumps and stuff like that. So that was expected. I'm not going to sit there and say pour water on him. But the Boston Celtics are not going to fire him. Let's just get that out the way. Unless it goes dastardly wrong next season in terms of a slow start, something of that nature, that's where I see the Celtics are going to fire him. So all the people saying now, fire him now. And he did save his job coming back from 3-0, right? Like, we have to kind of give him credit for that because it's like, yeah, that was the save face or whatever the case may be, but you extended the series at least. If he would have got swept, I think there would have been a strong possibility of him getting fired. But now that he was able to extend that, I don't think they're going to fire him, especially with the years on his deal and stuff like that. The Celtics aren't going to do that, especially they already have three coaches in 4 years, right? Um, to have four coaches in 5 years, that looks very unsustainable. Like, that just looks like the franchise is in a state of flux with that. That's like the Sacramento Kings all those years ago when they hired a bunch of coaches, fired a bunch of coaches, and like year in, year out, guys were in and out. You don't want that situation because you want to try to show stability, especially in the front office and in the coach's chair. You want to show stability there. So that brings me to my next thing here. And I think people forget that Damon Stoudemire, who is one of the better assistants for the Boston Celtics, departed to go coach, I think, Georgia Tech or Wake Forest. I'm not sure. But he left to go get a coaching job opportunity in college. And the Celtics did not fill those assistant spots. And a lot of those guys there that were assistants were Ime's guys, Ime Udoka's guys. So that isn't his staff. Those guys aren't in the veteran roles that they were with Ime. So looking ahead, it looks like those guys are going to be going to Houston and try to pivot and get their coaching opportunities down there in Houston with a guy that they actually coached with, build a relationship with, at a different level there that they have in Missoula. I believe they said that they're going to be looking to Joe Mazzulla to hire his own staff, or at least they were talking to Stephen Silas, the former Rockets head coach, and Frank Vogel, the former Lakers coach from a year ago. And I thought those were, I don't know if there was contract situations where they couldn't bring them in during the season. I don't think that could have happened. I'm not sure they could have hired them as consultants or whatever the case may be. But it looks like that's where they're heading. And if they are heading towards that way, Stephen Silas was an assistant for a long time, can kind of reach those guys on a different level than the train wreck that was in Houston. Like people were killing him for crying in front of the players and stuff like that because he was trying to get them to win and come together and trying to reach them. That was just a shitty situation because Houston wasn't trying to win. Um, a lot of guys were just trying to get numbers. Whatever the case of the situation, the owner wants to go in a different direction, all that stuff there. If he's brought in, I feel like that can help the offensive side of the ball and kind of tweak and give somebody Joe to talk to and bounce ideas off a little bit better than he was with the current assistants that the Celtics have. Now, looking at the defensive side of the ball, if you bring those guys in, Steven Silas and Frank Vogel is one of the better defensive coaches in the league. He had a top stellar defense in Indiana. I believe he had a good defense in Orlando. And when he went to LA, he had a good defense in LA. So I think we could get to that back to that side of the ball and building a defense up that was similar to what Ime was doing the year prior and what we were doing last year. I think that's the right way to go because now you have somebody that's going to specialize in defense. Frank Vogel does that. And if it's the one thing, if you don't want him as a head coach or whatever the case would be, and people have kind of shitted on him for Indiana, Orlando, and then LA, and people kind of got him out of there, which I don't think it was on him. But if you're going to beef up that side of the ball and get to that X's and O's standpoint where guys that have been in the league for a long time can go, Joe, hey, XYZ, and Joe can kind of bounce ideas off of that and kind of have some type of brainstorming and creativity to both sides of the ball, I'm for that. Lower Al Horford's minutes. I've been screaming this all postseason in the group, the sports group that I'm interested in talk. You got to lower Al Horford's minutes in terms of when he doesn't have it, he doesn't have it. And you have to be able to realize that and be able to pull him and then bring him back in if that's the case. I think we leaned a little bit too much on Al a little bit this season, and especially he's 36 years old. He's going to be 37, 38 on a lower deal. Maybe that will give him a little bit more flexibility, not lean on Al as much, and I think that's probably the best thing, right? Like, we do not need to keep relying on Al Horford. And doing that. Like, we don't have to do that. I think we can figure out something there and lean more on the defensive side of the ball, right? Like, for majority of the season, I was like, yo, play Robert Williams. And yes, he had a stomach virus in game 7. He was throwing up and stuff like that, whatever the case may be. But we got to be able to lean defensively on that side of the ball. That was the Celtics calling card last season. It wasn't so much our calling card this season. Even though we're one of the better teams in the league defensively and offensively, it's like that was, but the defense was the calling card for the Boston Celtics. That's what we need on the defensive end of the ball because that creates easy opportunities. It stops the other team from scoring. And we need to be able to shut shit down. Like, we have the personnel to shut shit down. We should be able to shut shit down on the defensive end. And I felt like over the course of the season, he leaned a little bit too much offensively. And especially in the playoffs, he leaned a little bit too much offensively at times. And it was just like, yo, we can – the offense is going to find itself at some point. That's just the way the Celtics for over a decade, even from the Doc Rivers era, has been, right? Like, the offense is going to find itself eventually at some point in time. The calling card is going to be the defensive side of the ball. That is what we need. We need something on the defensive side of the ball to get stops consistently. And I feel like that's something that we need to pay attention to desperately. If the Celtics are going to be able to turn it around and build any type of consistency, the defensive end of the ball is going to have to be the calling card of the Boston Celtics, right? Like, we have to be able to shut shit down like we did over the course of last year. That's what the Celtics have to do. But is it time to fire Joe Mazzulla? I don't think so, because I believe the team and the organization, I believe the organization is going to give him at least another year to figure it out, get a better coaching staff. I feel like they did a disservice with him in terms of that. And not really addressing the assistant coach's needs right there. And I feel like they realized, hey, we got to give this guy another year. This is our guy that we're committed to, that we're going to try to posture and try to build with. And I feel like that's what the Celtics are going to do in terms of that. Let's get into our NBA Finals preview.